In this video, we are going to find the values of sine theta, cos theta, and tan theta when our theta is equal to 45 degrees. Many times I have noticed that students like to memorize the values of sine 45, cos 45, tan 45, but most of the time they don't understand how these values are derived. I don't want you to memorize them, but I would rather encourage you to understand how these values are derived. So let's proceed. Consider a right angle triangle OMR, and it is right angled at O. Now let's assume that this triangle has 45 degrees at R. So it's 45 degrees at R. Now we know that using the triangle law, the sum of all the angles inside the triangle, so the sum of all the angles inside the triangle should be equal to 180 degrees, which means if you add the angle MOR, which is this angle at O, plus angle ORM, which is this angle at R, plus the angle OMR, which is this angle at M. When you add these three angles, you should get it as 180 degrees. Now we know that angle MOR, which is this angle at O, is 90 degrees, and this angle is 45 degrees. So let's substitute these values. So substituting these values, we get 90 plus 45 plus this angle at M is equal to 180 degrees. Now let's move these two values to the other side of the equation. So you get angle M is equal to 180 minus 90 minus 45. Simplifying, we get 45 degrees. So now let's mark this value here. So this angle is now 45 degrees. You will notice that these two angles are equal. So what does that mean? That means this is an isosceles triangle. In an isosceles triangle, two angles are equal, which means their opposite sides will also be equal. That is, the side which is opposite to 45 degrees, which is this angle M, will be equal to the side which is opposite to this 45 degrees, this side here OM. So OM is equal to OR. Is that clear? So if OM is equal to OR, let's put a value for OM and OR. Let's consider OR to be 1, and let's consider OM also to be 1. So we have two sides of the triangle known. Now to find sine 45 degrees, we need to have the dimensions of all the three sides. I mean mainly the hypotenuse, because sine 45 will be equal to opposite side over hypotenuse. So we don't know this value. So we're going to next step find this value. How do we get this value? Let us use the Pythagoras theorem. According to the Pythagoras theorem, MR will be equal to the square root of OM squared plus OR squared. So that's the Pythagoras theorem. So you have MR equal to the square root of OM squared plus OR squared. What is OM squared? OM is 1. So if you put the value of 1 over here, and 1 squared is 1. And then let's go for OR squared. OR squared is also 1 squared. So substituting that value here, you get square root of 1 plus 1, which is equal to root 2. Excellent. So now let us mark this side as square root 2. So this is a simple logic of how we can find out the values of the sides of a triangle when the angle is 45 degrees. Now, if you will remember this triangle always in your mind, know that when you're talking about sine 45 degrees, you're referring to an isosceles triangle and two sides are equal, so its opposite side and adjacent side are values 1, and you have the hypotenuse as square root 2. Now let's proceed to find sine 45 degrees. I've written here sine theta is equal to sine 45 degrees because our theta is equal to 45 degrees. Okay, so what is sine 45 degrees? Let's assume this is our theta. Okay, so which is the opposite side? Opposite side is OM. So sine 45 degrees will be equal to OM over MR, which is the hypotenuse, MR. And that is equal to 1 over square root 2. And that's a very simple method of finding sine 45. Next, let's go to cos 45. Now, cos 45 is equal to adjacent side over hypotenuse. So what is the adjacent side? Adjacent side is OR. OR over MR, which is the hypotenuse. And that is equal to, OR is 1 over MR is root 2. So we have now found what is cos 45. It's equal to 1 over root 2. And the last one is our tan 45. The tan 45 is nothing but opposite side by adjacent side. The opposite side is OM. So it's OM over adjacent side is OR. And that is equal to 1 over 1. And you get the value of 1. So now we have found the values of sine 45, cos 45 and tan 45. So you can remember this table now, but I insist that you remember this triangle always, so then you don't have to memorize it not knowing how we got this.